Okay, so let's get started. I want to welcome everyone and thank you all for coming. My name is Hannah Hike, and I'm the Vice President for Alpha Phi Sigma. In 2017, we started an event series that includes panel discussions, speaker events, and other forms of dialogue on issues related to criminology, criminal justice, and the law. We moved the series to a webinar format as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we are looking forward to returning to the events back in the Terrace Room in February. I would like to take a minute to thank the students, faculty, and staff in the School of Public Affairs for their support and extend a special thank you to the Dean of the School of Public Affairs, Paul Teskey, for his help, to our events coordinator, Emma Martz, and to our marketing director, Tula Wellbrook, for facilitating these events. Finally, I would like to acknowledge our Student Criminal Justice Honor Society, Alpha Phi Sigma, for their role in putting together these events. This evening's focus is on the work of the Back on My Feet organization in Denver. Lindsey Krenzer is this evening's speaker. Lindsey has served as the program director for Back on My Feet Denver since its launch in July of 2019. Prior to Back on My Feet, she had been working with startups and nonprofits for the past 10 years, focusing in program and project management, partnership development, operations, and workforce development. She specializes in program development and workforce development for underserved populations. She earned her Master of Science in Project Leadership and Management from Regis University and her Bachelor of Science in Political Science and Public Relations from Marquette University. The last 10 minutes of this evening's event is reserved for audience questions, so feel free to ask Lindsey questions during that time. Thank you all again for coming.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, good evening. I can't see anyone because my misunderstanding of technology, but I'm very excited to be here and to talk about Back on My Feet. I'm going to do my best to look at the Q&A section as well as the chat during this. I do tend to get sidetracked, so if you need to ask a question, feel free to do that that way. And I know Hannah will help me moderate that as well, just to make sure we can answer all of those. Anyways, as Hannah had mentioned, I'm here talking about Back on My Feet. Back on My Feet was founded in 2007 in Philadelphia. Our founder was a runner and used to run past a homeless facility every day, and one day invited some of the members to run with her. From there, started building up additional programming around that, and it's created Back on My Feet as to what we know today. Back on My Feet, kind of our organizational overview, our entire mission is to combat homelessness through the power of running, community support, and essential employment and housing resources. We do operate in 14 cities. Friday, we're actually launching our 15th city in Houston, so very excited about that. And we use running and walking as the first tool to build a community for members who are experiencing homelessness. We provide all different types of resources and support that are really crucial to creating that sustainability for yourself and being able to move forward. With that, we also make sure we meet members where they're at. We believe our members are capable of being meaningful and sometimes extraordinary ways. Everyone's a little bit different, but we know that they are more than their barriers and more than their background. So we see potential in what people look like. As I said, everything we do is based in that power of running or community or getting together in those morning circle ups. We operate, as I mentioned, in 14, soon to be 15 cities. Kind of how Back on My Feet operates, just I know a lot of people have those questions, is we have a national leadership team that helps us with operations, marketing, and those different pieces. And then we operate differently in all of our markets. We all have the same structure around, but how we operate is a little bit different depending on the city that you're in. This allows us, again, you'll hear me say this a lot, to meet members where they're at and meet the needs of each individual city. For example, and in Denver and Los Angeles and our Texas cities, transportation is pretty hard. So it's always a really big focus of ours to make sure members get transportation. Versus in New York and Chicago, where they have really, really reliable transportation systems. So we look at those as well. Additionally, the cool thing I always mention is if you ever are going on a trip and want to run, we've got running in all of these different cities. Back on My Feet operates kind of in 3 different phases and what our member journey looks like. I will dive pretty deep into all of these, but a couple important things to note is that with these phases, they are not always linear. If you've done any work within the sphere, you kind of understand that it is not always going to be a linear path that people go on. Relapse is a big issue. If there's outstanding tickets or warrants, and someone might go back into the criminal justice system. But understanding we're going to help that member no matter where they're at. All of our members start with that community aspect. And that really is carried on throughout their entire time with Back on My Feet. We always welcome members to our circle with new shoes. And I say members join for 2 reasons. 1, because they hear really great things about Back on My Feet, or 2, because they need new shoes that fit. As you know, there's a fantastic services around the city that offer clothing donations and different pieces like that. But we also often have members who are really excited about getting a new pair of running shoes or a pair of running shoes that actually fit them. One of our alumni actually, his whole thing is, I had 13 and a half size feet. I had big fat feet, so I had to join so I could get shoes so I could walk. And then he fell in love with the program. We build that community through our morning circle ups and our volunteer and staff community. Our next steps community is really our career readiness our career readiness community. In there, members are receiving educational support, job and training, employment and housing resources through staff and volunteer coaches. And then finally, one of the coolest parts of the program, I think, is our alumni program. Once our members are employed and get housing, they become alumni. Alumni are still eligible to come back, participate in those runs, still eligible for services and financial aid and different pieces. So really making sure we continue to support our members. One thing I often find when we're talking with members, especially if it's their 2nd or 3rd time through a program, is they do really, really well while they're in a program. And then when they get to graduation or moving out or living on their own, they lose some of those aspects of community. And that starts to kind of start that trickle again down. As I mentioned, I'd go into a little bit more deeper of what all these look like. So our morning circle ups are comprised of our Back on My Feet team. Each city may have 1 team or multiple teams. Right now in Denver, we have 1 team. And a team is comprised of members and volunteers. With that, we all meet for a morning circle up. Those happen 2 to 3 mornings a week, kind of depending on which team you are. Teams meet outside of a partner facility early in the morning, multiple days a week to run. And with that, we want to make sure that those circle ups are really welcoming. So before COVID, it was always hugs and high fives to welcome. Now we're more fist bumps, elbow bumps, making sure we're keeping our space as well. We also want to make sure that those are kind of an equal space. The really, really cool thing in the morning, actually on one of our runs, I called one of our lead volunteers, one of our members, and he's like, "Oh no, it's me." And I said, "Well, I can't tell the difference. Everyone's in their running clothes." So we want to create that equal space where everyone can feel comfortable and be a part of a community. For that 1 hour a day, members are then part of a community. They're not homeless. They're not re-entering. They're not an addict. They're part of this team. And that's how they're seen. And then the final thing we always do at our morning circle ups is a question of the day. One thing everyone's like, "Oh, this is kind of a silly get to know you game," which is true. It's a really, really great way to get to know someone. It's a great icebreaker for runs. If someone is getting ready to run with somebody, you can definitely talk about the question of the day. "Oh, I heard your favorite band was The Who. My favorite band is this. Let's talk about that." The other thing we're starting to build with that is that conversation skill, that small talk skill that we see a lot in interviews. We all know we're awkward when we go into interviews. We're not exactly sure how to make that small talk. And for a lot of our members, they've been ostracized from society, or they're taking their first steps back into society, and they haven't been doing that and aren't sure they can make those conversations with quote unquote normal people. So we want to make sure that we utilize that and say, "Hey, you have now hundreds of questions that you've been asked, or dozens of questions you've been asked. You can ask those during an interview and kind of make that small talk." So that's definitely a piece where we try to start bringing those cultures together. The other thing we want to make sure we're doing is, I think Back on My Feet is the biggest eye into what homelessness really looks like in the city, because you're not coming in and serving a meal. You're not driving someone to an interview. You're actually running with them. You're struggling with them. And as as a kind of casual runner, there's a whole journey and piece with that kind of comes along, and we can grow together in that piece. Everything is really focused in that commitment, accountability, and dedication. Members must keep that 90% attendance level to stay active. We got a little bit looser during COVID, just because of illness and different pieces. We want to make sure people stay comfortable. But that is really one of the big pieces of being back on my feet, is showing up. There's that old adage, the first step to success is showing up. With that, we want to make sure we keep pushing that foot forward. And we want to make that hour of your day the best part of your day, and a really, really, really great way to start your day. Because we've all woken up in bad mornings. And a lot of our members are coming in a room where they're sleeping with 2 other guys, if not hundreds of other people. So we want to give them that space to actually have that bright start to the day. We also make sure we're looking at that physical and mental health of individuals. Obviously, with running, there's some physical health benefits. We want to make sure people start slow if they haven't been running. We actually have a 1 mile run on your first one, kind of general rule for most members. It's actually, we take that and say, hey, if you can do a mile, that's great. And then let's, add to that tomorrow. So we start with those small successes and build on that. Along with that, we also don't just run. I always try to clarify that as we meet members where they're at. So if you are walking, that is fantastic. If you are running a 4-minute mile, I will find someone else to run with you, because I cannot run that fast, but it should be pretty good. And then the other piece is the mental health piece that comes along with being more physically active. With that, we see members more social, increase in mood, and increase in motivation. I'm sure you've read a bunch of stories about folks who start running after they've been addicted or in a different system. It does 2 things. One, it puts structure into your day. And if you're coming out of a system that you've been told exactly where you need to be and not need to be every day for the past day, 2 days, 5 years, 10 years, it starts to add that structure into a day. And the second thing it does is it kind of replaces that. You get those endorphins, you get those good feelings. So we want to make sure we're trying to replace those addictions. We also make sure our members have new gear. As I mentioned, the shoe story, that is a really, really important piece. A lot of time people ask me why we don't take donations from individuals for running clothes. And the reason is slightly used to different people means different things. And we want to make sure we're giving our members the nicest things, because a lot of times it's the first not hand me down or not hand me up they've gotten. And then finally, we make sure we do have socials. One of my biggest rules is having fun and making sure you're enjoying life. A lot of what members are doing at this point is a program of some sort. They're checking in with parole officers, they're doing UAs, they're doing these different pieces. So I want to make sure there's some fun in life too. There's something to look forward to. There's something to look back on. This time of year is actually especially hard for a lot of individuals who have had traumatic experiences, don't have family, have had bad experiences the holidays. This is really a tough time. So we're trying to kind of reframe what that might look like, while also understanding, hey, I understand Thanksgiving may be really, really hard for you, or the holidays might be really, really hard, and try and focus on that and be that community. Our Next Steps program, it's kind of our career readiness and life readiness program. Excuse me. We do Next Steps workshops. That's our staff, our corporate partners, our community partners, and they focus on employment, financial health, housing, and wellness, so that we can support members on that along that way. We poll members about every 6 months to make sure we're still telling them stuff that they feel is relevant. And then I also am continually talking with my colleagues and colleagues in the area to make sure if there's something new that comes up. All of our classes are now digital, which came up because of COVID. We have a whole new emphasis on using Zoom, which I could probably use that class anyways, if this evening has taught me anything. So those different pieces. We also then meet with members and do a goal setting and opportunity assessment. If you've heard the term barrier assessment, you know what our opportunity assessment is, but we don't want to, again, focus on that past. Yes, having a criminal background is going to be your barrier, but let's see what you want to do first and see how we can get there before we tell you no. My rule in goal setting is everything is possible if you're willing to try and see what that looks like. Each member set their own goals, and then they get matched with a coach to help them start making a goal plan and start making those steps towards those goal plans. Our coaches are members of the community, our volunteers. that meet with our members every week to 2 weeks, and making sure they're making that forward progress. They're not doing any work for a member, but they're making sure the member is getting that work done. I like to call them accountability buddies, and then I get made fun of because a member told me, hey, I'm not in kindergarten. I just think I like to make fun words up. And so I get made fun of a lot by members. And then finally, financial aid. And this is actually a huge part of our program. One of the criminal justice students, Katie Welsh, just joined us this fall to help us do a research project. And what we found is career coaching and financial aid are actually the biggest pieces that help members be successful. Our financial aid is accessible for all of our members and alumni. And it is a financial aid program that is funded through Back on My Feet, and members apply, and it can be to anything that's going to help them reach self-sufficiency. So what I have been able to do in Denver is for your traditional needs, your transportation to work, your work clothes, I've been able to connect with other community partners that can provide that, because my funding doesn't have a limit on what it can be. It can be it could be speeding tickets, it can be fines, it could be trying to figure out some child support, making sure a $50 payment's getting paid. But really anything to help do that. A lot of times we'll do like first month's rent or a security deposit, because even if you're working a full-time job in Denver, it's still really, really expensive to get an apartment anywhere. So we want to make sure we're helping with that. The final part of the program is when members graduate. I get super excited and also super sad. I always tell members, I'm super excited for you, and I'm also super sad that you're moving out and moving on. But the great thing is most members don't move on. They stay on as alumni. So our alumni get a little bit different services. They get alumni workshops. Those are done locally and nationally. And those are going to be on topics that aren't going to be relevant for our active members. So everything from buying a house to getting promoted, to having a tough conversation with your boss, investing, those different pieces to make sure members are educated on how to do it and realize they can do it. We'll hear in a little bit about a member who is actually in the process of buying her first home. We also do what's next goal setting. As I kind of mentioned earlier, what we see a lot of times is members do really, really well in the program, and then all of a sudden they graduate from the program and they don't have to do a UA, or they don't have to be in bed at 10 o'clock, or they don't have to do specific things and aren't prepared for that. So we want to make sure members are prepared for life. So we do that with our what's next goal setting, where members take those skills they learned from running and from goal setting previously and apply it to other areas of life. So I oftentimes call this fun goal setting. So what are you going to do for fun? What are you going to make sure you're doing to fill your cup? And what are you going to do to make sure you're keeping your community? Because we know that community, most often community equals success, or it at least helps from failure. And the other thing we do is identify, hey, what is my point in which what are my risk factors, or when do I know I'm starting to go into a way of life that I don't want to be in? And how do I check in to make sure that doesn't happen? So we want to identify those before that happens. Just as if we may do in running. I'll run 5 miles. Great. Or I'll run 30 minutes. We want to set that same thing up. I'll be successful until I know this exact point. At that point, I'll check in and make sure things are okay. And this check-in system, if we can have alumni work with us, that also allows us to make sure our alumni stay successful long-term. It also helps us prepare members for even longer down the road, because this is a skill everybody needs to have. I actually think the best skill we teach in Back on My Feet is goal setting. Some people say it's the community. I say that's not a skill, but it's definitely that piece. And then finally, again, financial aid. Last year when COVID hit, we actually had a direct to member funds that members could apply for. So we helped pay rents, we paid medical bills for our alumni to make sure they stayed in housing. We wanted to prevent members from going back through that entire cycle as much as we could. And that was really, really successful. Just kind of some program impact you'll see here on the left of your screen. This is one of our alumni, Patrick. He was actually the member with the really fat feet. I'll give you just kind of a really quick rundown. This was Patrick's 3rd time at trying to get sober. He'd already been through the program at our facility partner once, and he came and he showed up because he needed shoes. And then he came to the first run and someone gave him a hug. And it was the first hug he said he'd gotten in years. And he felt welcomed. And so he came back. Patrick never ran. Patrick actually had a knee issue and couldn't even walk most of the time. So he would just come, take attendance, wait for everybody to get back, and cheer people when they got back. Patrick has since had knee surgery, has graduated the program, gotten his dream job of being a cook. We helped him find culinary education and get him his job as a cook. And now is married and living a really, really great life. So it's really great to check in with him. And he's all about giving back, always able to give rides to other members in different pieces. By the numbers, about 70% of our members are successful. That means they get housing and employment. In Denver, we really ride that 70% line. We scooch up to about 80% if a member makes it through the first 2 months. One thing we have done in Denver is that you used to have to be at our facility partner for 1 month to join Back on My Feet. We actually decreased that time to 2 weeks because what they found was the members in Back on My Feet were being more successful because they were building that community. They're around positive influences. The members in Back on My Feet were more positive, and so that started to wear off. And so that word got around. So our success numbers are going to go down a little bit, but that also means we get to serve more individuals and give more individuals the opportunity. And so I'm okay with that. About 83% of our members maintain or get their employment or get promoted. And then 44% receive a wage increase within the first 6 months. So these are all some really, really great statistics to know. Additionally, we see those social and health impacts. 97% of members take a more positive attitude toward themselves, 72% are more social and have life more meaningful. 48% see that reduction in high blood pressure, and 58% that a reduction in nicotine usage. My favorite conversation to have is, hey, I want to quit smoking. And then usually it takes about 6 weeks from then for a member to be like, oh, wait, I actually can't smoke and be really successful as a runner, so I want to make sure I'm doing that. All right, I'm going to see if I set this up right.
Life before Back on My Feet.
Can you hear?
I was a drug addict. I suffered with the meth addiction for 26 years. The last 5 years of my addiction, I was an IV drug user. It cost me my family. It cost me just my whole life, my children. I became just isolate from all my friends. It just made life really hard, very difficult. I didn't know where to go. Life didn't really have any meaning at that point. With my family was broken. I didn't communicate with my mom very much. My relationship with my son was no longer there. He really looked up to me when he was younger. We were very close. And just because of my addiction and making the wrong choices, we lost our bond that we had together. And my oldest son didn't even talk to me for almost 8 months, so it was very hurtful. So, what was it like when I first joined Back on My Feet? It was interesting. At first I thought, oh gosh, 5:30 in the morning, that's really early. But I said, I'll try it. So, I was a little nervous. I was the only girl member to sign up in the beginning. So I was like, well, maybe it'll be more motivation. Maybe, it was a little scary at first, but I'm glad I did it. The Back on My Feet community to me meant that I didn't have just one accountability partner. I had several accountability partners. It meant that I had someone to talk to, a fresh person to talk to that could give me fresh insight on things that were happening in life. It gave me a community to belong to. It was a very loving community. It's a lot of support, a lot of encouragement, a lot of positivity, and a lot of inspiration came from being in the Back on My Feet community. Back on My Feet also helped me with obtaining my current job. To me, I look at it as not just a job, but actually I have a career now. Lindsey worked with me very extensively. We got my resume up to date, and then they're partnering with the Gaylord. I did my application, initiating the interview process, the referrals. The Gaylord was really great. They were happy to have, a Back on My Feet member to come work for them. And they were just happy with the accomplishments that I've been able to make with Back on My Feet. So right now, life is great. I'm very happy, full of joy. I'm 2.5 years clean from my meth addiction. I have reestablished the relationships with my mom. We hang out all the time. Our favorite place is the 16th Street Mall. I've reestablished the relationship with my children. I spend a lot of time with them. I'm able to have family gatherings now at my place, cook the kids dinner. I'm able to just budget my money better. I learned a lot of budgeting skills. The budgeting skills came in handy because now I'm in the process of buying my first home. I've saved $2,000 towards my down payment. This helped me increase my credit score by about 200 points in the last year. I've attained a lot of physical goals. Life is just great. My family's here. I'm going to be getting married. My kids are spending time with me, and I'm getting healthier. My diabetic numbers have came down, and just life is fabulous. So I just want to thank everybody at Back on My Feet. That's been such great help and such great support. Everybody here has just been amazing, and I'm just so glad that I had the chance and the opportunity to be with Back on My Feet. I would just like to say thank you to everybody that's helped to support and organize Back on My Feet. It's been such a great organization, and it has totally changed my life.
So that is one of our alumni, Michelle, who was one of our founding members and is now, again, as she mentioned, she actually just purchased her home and got engaged. So she's very excited about that. Still loves her job at the Gaylord and still loves participating in Back on My Feet when she can. So it's really, really great. What I love about Michelle's story is it's actually quite symbolic of she graduated, moved into her own apartment from a facility that was across the highway from where she used to sleep on the street. So Michelle's story actually tells us a lot about our members and why we do a lot of the programming the way we do. Not much we do in Back on My Feet is without meaning or without purpose. And so that's kind of what we take a look at. So for example, when I mentioned we start with 1 mile and go from there. I had a member the other day go, wait, this is exactly what we're doing with goal setting. We start with one thing and go from there. So we try to make sure we're making those connections there. So even some of the concepts that might be harder to grasp or might be different or might be something you're not used to, it's something that you can grasp, which is actually the great aspect of the physical piece, is that physical things you can be extremely, extremely quantitative and describe about, but we then take that into other aspects of the world. I'll give a little bit of talk about Denver's program specifically a little bit. As I mentioned, we launched in July of 2019. We partnered with Denver Rescue Mission. And we're adding 2 new partners in 2022, which I'm pretty excited about. We're going to be in downtown Denver then. So we'll have 3 teams running out of Denver. Thus far, we've started about 130 members. I'm seeing members run over 8,400 miles. I'd like to talk a little bit about the life experience of members. One thing I'll mention, this is all self-reported. And I actually hadn't taken a really deep look at this until I was talking with Katie about her research project, is a lot of members self-reported that they had no experience in the criminal justice system, had no misdemeanors, but then working with them, I found out they did. And so what we found out is there's obviously a big stigmatism around that. And so we want to make sure that members feel comfortable sharing that with us, and then also having that conversation of that's not going to be the ends of everything. I'm going to go ahead and guess a lot of people on this chat probably don't really know how to get involved with individuals or don't really know what to do or what's the right thing to do. Do I give the guy on the street $1? Do I buy someone a meal? To that, I always say, do what you feel most comfortable with. But that's what I like about Back on My Feet is all of a sudden we give that introduction to that world a little bit differently. You're in an environment that is controlled and monitored. And we do look to make sure our members are participating well within the program and they're in. And we also do a sex offender check. So you're in a little bit safer of an environment, but you get to know people. You get to realize homelessness, being in the criminal justice system, isn't defining. It doesn't make you scary. It doesn't make you different. It doesn't make you crazy. It doesn't make you any word you can throw out that we've heard to define anyone that's been addicted or been in the criminal justice system or both. It's just a part of your story. And you have the opportunity now to decide what you do with that story. So we always continue to make those conversations. Now, if you ever see me at work in a workshop talking to members, I will never say it like that. I cuss a lot. I let members cuss a lot. I try to keep it as real as possible, but also making sure that people feel comfortable. It's okay to be who you are. I want to know that you like to fish. I want to know these different pieces. And the same thing with volunteers. That is the other thing we've now done with the career coaching, as well as many of us have mentors or advocates for us in the workforce. And so we're making sure that our members have that. It's actually a fairly new program that we started about a year ago. We piloted it here in Denver, and we're actually spreading it around the country. And what used to happen is we used to meet with members about on a monthly basis. It was almost like a case management meeting. I always tried to make it not case management-y. We had couches. We wanted to make it comfortable, but it wasn't quite that. So what we found was there were these really meaningful conversations happening on runs, happening at socials, happening during circle ups. There were volunteers that were trying to connect members with jobs. So it was a really natural transition to say, hey, we don't need to be the ones having those conversations. Our volunteers have. And so that career coach program has actually developed out of that. Career coaches can do a couple of things. They're able to check in with members more frequently. They're able to bring in other perspectives. And then all of our career coaches can talk together to make sure we're sharing resources and different pieces. And we do make sure our coaches are trained. Now, we do have staff always available for some of the harder pieces, some of those harder conversations, or there's bigger barriers to address or talking about those different pieces. And of course, to do administrative pieces and partner development in those pieces. But what we've seen is with career coaches, not only have we opened the door to more opportunities for our current members, is we're going to be able to expand more because we can actually work with more individuals at the same time. While I individually can probably only work with about 25 individuals at a time, if I have 30 career coaches, all of a sudden that ups the number of members that we can serve, opening that opportunity to more people. As I mentioned, even with the running and making sure cutting down our getting started is opening that door to more people, even though we know we might not get as many people graduated, people might not be quite we want to make sure we're opening those doors for other people. And the final thing I think that we take a look at is making sure members understand that just because you're staff or you're a career coach doesn't mean you're the only one that has the answer. Members often have the answers themselves. It's just letting them feel confident and comfortable enough to figure that out. So with that, we actually set up kind of peer-to-peer accountability buddies or goal setting folks as well. So that way, if, for example, if John is going for an interview, he has 20 people around him who he could practice his interview skills with. He has 20 people he could talk to about his nervousness. If I'm off that week, if I'm not in office that day, if his career coach isn't available that day, he still has those other resources. And again, building that community. As I mentioned, we'll go on a sidetrack as I kind of went down there. You can see here our members, we've got 44% of our members have a felony conviction, 61% had a misdemeanor conviction, 58 had a drug addiction, and 65% had an alcohol addiction. And for many of our members, those would overlap. Those different statistics overlap. And so a lot of those things have led to homelessness. Most of our members are going to have either some sort of drug charge, drinking charge, criminal trespassing, or criminal mischief. There are some that are thrown in there that are assault or against people, but for most of the times they are crime of opportunity, crime of position, or socioeconomic status. So we want to make sure members know that. And then we want to equip members with these tools that when they do go out and job search, they can talk about what happened. They can talk about what they've done. And they're not just seen as that person. If someone comes in as a referral from Back on My Feet, they're coming in as a Back on My Feet member. What I know about that person is they're getting up to run every morning at 5:45. They're getting up to go to workshops. They have a career coach. They have this support system around them. Oh, they also happen to have a background. We want to make sure that that's not what we're focusing on first. The other thing that we're able to do is some of that pre-screening for employers and for members. If I know a job is not going to let someone in with a certain background, I'm not going to have a member work on an application for an hour. It's unfair to both parties. So we want to make sure we're keeping those pieces straight as well. The same thing with drug and alcohol addiction. Again, we see a lot of smaller crimes coming through with that. Big part of what we want to make sure is members are able to stay sober and do have that community moving forward. This is a photo from when we went hiking. So as I mentioned, one thing we try to do is those socials. And how we do socials is I say, hey, what do you guys want to do? And then the members tell me. And then we try and set that up to make sure folks can be successful and do what they want to do. Again, I like to hike. Members want to get out of the city and go hike. So we want to make sure we allow members to do that. We're actually going axe throwing for our holiday party this year. So another thing that I enjoy doing. So that should be fun. There are lots of ways to get involved. And this is where I'm going to kind of bring in those different pieces. I mentioned earlier, get involved. It doesn't have to be with Back on My Feet, but get involved with your community. Homelessness is not a downtown Denver problem. It's not a Capitol Hill problem. It's not a, hey, there's someone camping in my backyard problem. It's a community. We want to make sure that even though someone might be experiencing homelessness, they're still a neighbor. They're still part of our community. So get involved in a way that you feel comfortable and makes sense. Maybe that's cooking meals. Maybe that's volunteering at a kitchen. Maybe that's donating your time or resources and what that might look like. As I mentioned, we have different ways to volunteer. We have our members that we have volunteers that come on morning runs, which is probably I think one of the most fun ways to get involved. Again, it's not always your best workout because we want to make sure we're meeting members where they're at again. So it's not always, your best workout in the morning, but it's a really, really great time to make that connection and also get to know other volunteers and what's going on in the community. I've learned so much from members and Back on My Feet and in past experiences. So that's been a really, really great experience. We also have core teams. So there's always leadership roles within Back on My Feet. We have those career coaches. And this is always the one that people are like, oh, I don't know if I can be a career coach. You probably can. What it takes is that dedication. So an hour every other week, as well as the ability to kind of listen and understand without having that judgment. And that's really in any part of the world that you want to do, is you want to have those conversations. But really, you're that member's cheerleader. You're there to help them figure out, hey, do I want to be a cook or do I want to change careers? You're there to help look through those different opportunities. And the other thing you're there for is to present those opportunities. When I first started working on Back on My Feet, every member wanted to graduate and go work at Home Depot because that's what every other member did. And they knew they could get a job at home, and you knew you could get a job at Home Depot. You knew you'd be able to get in. You knew your background might not be an issue. About 2 months in, I sent one of the members to a culinary training. The next week, every single person wanted to go to culinary training. So what we found is we're really limited to what we know. And so if I know that everyone in my neighborhood works at Home Depot, then that's where I'm going to go work. But if I know if I can hop on a bus for 10 minutes and go work at a warehouse, go work in tech, go work downtown at a bank, there's all these opportunities to look at that members can find and go to. We also, as I mentioned, do workshops. We do 2 different types of workshops. One is our Next Steps workshop. That's anything from interview skills to time and task management to growth mindset to financial literacy. And then we also do fitness workshops. In the summer, it's super fun. We go to the park and do yoga and HIIT workouts and cross training outside. In the wintertime, we try to keep it a little bit easier because we're inside, especially now with masks. We want to make sure that people aren't kind of overexerting themselves as well. And then finally, there's always opportunities to intern and get to know more about opportunities with Back on My Feet and with other organizations. So that's kind of that overview, kind of why we do what we do with Back on My Feet, kind of how we approach things and kind of how I approach things. Because as I mentioned, we have that national guidance, and then locally we take that guidance and are able to put it to use, how it's going to be best utilized in our city and how it's going to best serve those members. which is a really, really great opportunity. And the other thing that we have that opportunity to is really take a look at what your background may be and see what that opportunity is and what's that barrier in the way. And a lot of times barriers are scary. I know, I don't want to go to a 6:30, I don't want to go to a 6 a.m. workout class because it's dark out. And that's a very small barrier. I can get into my car that's heated and go to a heated gym. But it's better to do if a friend goes with me, or it's easier to do if my husband's also getting up. So we kind of take that same approach with Back on My Feet as, hey, getting up at 5:45 to go to your first run might be hard, but hey, someone will come knock on your door to make sure you come with you. And then you have an entire community of people that can support you and do that. Before I open up, Hannah's ahead of me. So before I open up for any questions, here's my contact information. Feel free to reach out to me. I clearly am not the marketing person because I put Instagram, not the cool little icon. But there would love to get to know you. There's tons of opportunities. I love to talk about Back on My Feet. I love to talk about my job. I love to talk about Denver. So any questions you may have, would love to answer either now or feel free to reach out to me. And I will. Okay, so my first question is about, do you not accept any sex offenders or do you consider individual circumstances? So we don't accept level 3 sex offenders at Back on My Feet. There is actually a policy in Denver that restricts who can reside in residential facilities. And so that actually normally guides members who can be in the program. So in Back on My Feet, we don't allow level 3, which is usually aggravated or assault level. And that's because we are out early in the morning and we want to make sure everyone is safe. Now that's a rule I can probably argue against for a lot of reasons, but I have to follow policy on that one. But really it's the policy of Denver's transitional housing rules that limit who can be in the program. It's not Back on My Feet that limits who can be in the program. We do require that all of our members are staying at one of our facility partners. And we have found that Back on My Feet works best with transitional housing and sober living. Emergency shelters are a little bit harder because as we talked about is you get gear, you're getting up at 5:45 in the morning. We want to make sure you've got those basic needs met first, and then we can go to that next step. If your basic needs aren't being met, we want to make sure we give you those resources to get there before we go to that next step. Is there any plans in Back on My Feet to expand to other areas of Denver? Yes, I'm actually going to turn off my screen so I can see if that's okay. Yes, there are plans to build outside of Denver. Really what we are limited by, and it's not really, I don't think a limitation, I think it's opportunities, is who our partners would be. We actually were supposed to expand in 2019, and then it was 2019, wasn't it? No, it was 2020. It was 2020. I'm off by years. We were supposed to expand in 2020. COVID happened, really put a caveat on that. One thing we know about COVID is there's a higher risk of exposure if you're staying at a facility that has multiple people staying there and at entry-level jobs, which happen to be the jobs of many of our members, and it happens to be where they are. So we didn't want to risk cross-exposure between facilities in 2020. Now we are launching, as I mentioned, in 2022, we're launching 2 more teams downtown. I know I've got some Colorado Springs interest, some Boulder interest, some Fort Collins interest. So yes, we are expanding. And if you're interested or like, hey, come to, I think I named the cities I can think of, come to Crested Butte. Let's have that conversation, see what that looks like and what that looks like. But yes, we do plan on continuing to expand. Right now, Denver is the only city in the Rocky Mountain District, but we kind of plan to expand along that range, not only in Colorado, but also in Arizona and Utah and different surrounding states. Do you ever have time when you have too many people who want to be a part of the program, and how is that handled? Well, it's funny you asked that. I assume you mean participants of the program. I had 8 new members start yesterday, and my first response was, oh my God, what am I going to do? we figure it out. It might mean you wait a little bit longer for a career coach. Really what I am restricted by is by the number of volunteers and the number of hours I have in my world. So the more volunteers we have, the more members we can serve. Right now, I have not hit capacity limits, which is great. Again, that's also why we found that need to expand to that new career coach model versus just staff model. Because through career coaching, all the career coaches can send me their notes. I can read those. And so instead of sitting down with a member for an hour, I can kind of give those resources out and follow up in about 10 to 15 minutes, which allows us to serve more people and more members. So thus far, we've not had to turn anybody away. And I hope to continue to be able to say that. Where exactly are we expanding in downtown Denver? We're going to have a 5 Points location and a Rhino location. So 5 Points right around Champa and Park, and then right around, I got yelled at, it's not Broadway anymore, it's Brighton and like 30th. So they're actually quite close to each other. And the kind of the plan for that, and actually the plan for expansion for Back on My Feet, is that we are able to partner with multiple agencies with the same team. So for example, if you're downtown, there's multiple agencies down there. There's Samaritan House, there's another Denver Rescue Mission location that's an emergency shelter. There's Urban Peak, there's St. Francis Center. There's different places that we could draw from. And that way there's not pressure on one facility to have all of the members, or that they need to have that many members in there. Because what we found is about 10 to 15% of a facility usually participate in Back on My Feet. A lot of facilities in Denver are smaller. So we want to make sure that everyone gets that opportunity while still keeping any indoor activities separate until COVID is figured out. And then our downtown teams, when we expand downtown, we will actually have teams running Monday through Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday in Park Hill, Monday, Wednesday, Friday downtown, Tuesday, Thursday in Rhino, and Saturday we do a community run in Park Hill. And that's kind of how so there'll be an opportunity to volunteer or to get involved any day of the week, and hopefully at any location. As I mentioned, we'll definitely continue to build upon that as we can.
I have one question. So is there something that you could, a piece of advice that you could give to people as far as something that we could do to kind of get rid of the stigma that homelessness and addiction often brings?
Care. I always say you don't have to give money to the person on the street. And they actually did this study that people are more more willing to look at random writing on a street than a human on the street. So even if you're not gonna give money or food, I'm not telling you to do that in any way, shape, or way. But if someone does is another human, it's polite to say hello. It's polite to say, how's your day going? It's acknowledge someone's presence. Again, we are all one humankind. We are all one community. So we want to make sure people feel welcome, even if they're not like us. So I would say, and just because someone has done something, and you might hear something about them, still have that conversation, and treat everyone with that kindness. I know if I was in that situation, I wouldn't want someone to be looking at me like that. So just having that compassion piece. And then giving what you can, and that looks different in different places. If you work in a environment where you can talk about hiring practices, look at there's tons of community partners that run career readiness programs, just like Back on My Feet. Actually work with a lot of big corporate partners now, and so that's one way to help. Also look at are you drug testing people? Is there a reason that you're drug testing people? Are you doing background checks? Why? What can we start moving these needles? We say we have a huge labor shortage right now, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. But I'm working with an individual who has a misdemeanor assault from 4 years ago, is an excellent cook and a manager, but he can't get a job where he's going to make more than $16 an hour because of his background, because he can't get into any place where he can make that long. And he's like, well, I've done all of this program and all these pieces since then. So I think, not just automatically judging someone by the position that they're in, and seeing who they are, and getting to know that person. Now, I'm not saying all the time that's going to end up perfectly, but give people that time, and that benefit of the doubt. Also, if you see something that's not right on the street. If you see someone getting beat up, if you see something happening, do say something, call somebody, let that be known. We wouldn't want that to happen to ourselves or, our neighbor next door. So just make sure you're caring about the community and individuals that way. And then if you're in a place to help out, do so. There's so many different ways to do that. Do you like piano? Come play the piano. Does, create those welcoming environment.
That's great advice. Thank you. Well, if nobody else has any further questions, I just want to say thank you so much for your presentation that you've given this evening. It was absolutely amazing and eye-opening. And also thank you to everyone who hopped on to watch. Have a wonderful night.
Awesome. Thank you so much.